That's my boy. No, my boy!
Father, help!
I'm so sorry they did this to you. Yes, beloved Expressive Iteration was banned, but at least Winota was banned too, so I guess it all evens out. Anyways, as a devout Izzet mage, of course I was taken aback by the banning of Expressive Iteration, especially because I had just put together Izzet Prowess, a deck that I really love playing. Have been playing it since the beginning, before it was when it was more Wizard Prowess. But in today's video, we are going to prove that Izzet is not dead. We are going to talk about the deck, talk about what changes we can make, take it to an FNM, see how it does. But before that, I need to thank Playing Pioneer for sponsoring this video. Playing Pioneer is your one-stop for everything Pioneer, meta-analysis, articles, and guess what? I happen to write some articles for this where you might have found this video as well, my FNM report, as well as other articles by me, so make sure you go to playingpioneer.com and check it out. Now, let's get into the deck. So of course this deck was doing numbers. It was doing really well, really gaining some prominence in the format right before the iteration ban, but I don't think that means that it is a dead deck. In fact, I think the Izzet Prowess deck is less affected by the banning than things such as Izzet Control and even Phoenix. I think this deck, because it is so low to the ground, it doesn't need the iteration necessarily to fix our lands, because we can win with 3-4 lands. I won with 2 lands before. It's just so low to the ground and you're ripping through your deck so fast, pumping those prowess creatures, that we were able to find some replacements for it that I think go really well. So let me talk about the deck, and then I'll really highlight what we'll be replacing Expressive Iteration with. So of course, with this deck, we are running the regular prowess creatures, a playset of Monastery Swiftspear, as well as a playset of Soulscar Mage, just the bays. And by the way, I got hold on. Sorry, I just had to flex on them with my signed playsets of both of these. Yep, got those at DreamHack. Thanks, Steve Argyle, for that. But anyways, we're playing the regular 8 copies of our Prowess creatures, Monastery Swiftspear and Soulscar Mage. And if you're not familiar with Prowess, by the way, Prowess is a triggered ability that says that the creature will get +1/+1 till end of turn every time that you cast a non-creature spell. To go with that, we have a pseudo prowess creature in Sprite Dragon. Now, the upside of Sprite Dragon is not only does it fly, but it actually keeps those pumps because it gets +1 counters every time that we cast a non-creature spell. In this deck, and in a lot of lists, you're running Ledger Shredder. Now, in other lists, you're playing 4 copies of it. In this list, we're running 3. And the reason is I just have 3 copies. I might consider playing 4, but honestly, after playing this deck, I feel like 3 is enough. It's a flying body. You know, definitely the extra card draw when our opponents are playing 2 spells is needed. But with this deck, we're able to draw so many cards that I rarely find that I don't have a Ledger Shredder in hand to play. And with our threats established, let's talk about the big thing. How will we be replacing Expressive Iteration? Well, I'm here to tell you that I think Izzet Charm is the premium choice for that. Izzet Charm is the exact same cost as Expressive Iteration, and I think out of everything I've tested Strategic Planning, I've tested Chart of Course, I even tested Reckless Impulse. All of them just did not feel as satisfying as I needed. Izzet Charm, having played with it, just felt the best for this deck. I love the versatility on it, and I feel like, so let's just go through the card real quick. First off, you can counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. You can deal 2 damage to a creature, or the big one that I use most of the time is draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. Now, Iteration, of course, gets you some different advantages to that, but I feel like the discard isn't such a disadvantage in this deck because we are playing 4 copies of Treasure Cruise, and we really want to make sure that our graveyard is filled up so that we can delve that and get, play the Treasure Cruise for essentially 1 mana when we get the chance. So I think the versatility on Izzet Charm plus the draw 2 discard 2 makes it the perfect replacement for Expressive Iteration in this list. And now that we've covered that, let's talk about the other cantrips that we're going to be playing. Of course, we're playing a playset of Consider to draw cards, to pump our prowess creatures, and fill up our graveyard. We're also running a playset of Opt, again, for all the same things. It doesn't fill the graveyard as scries, but it does draw us cards and gives us prowess. Just make the important thing about this deck is to always make sure that you have spells, non-creature spells in hand, so that your threats are more than just 1/1s, 1/2s, whatever, that they're always constantly getting bigger, being even more of a threat. In this deck, I decided to do a 2-2 split between Fiery Impulse and Reckless Rage when it comes to removal. A lot of 4 toughness, or should I say a lot of toughness larger than 2 in the format right now, so I like the Reckless Rage for that. You know, you can target one of your prowess creatures, and because Soulscar Mage and Monastery Swiftspheres are 1/2s, or even Ledger Shredder being a 1/3, the 2 damage isn't going to kill them, but the 4 damage is usually going to kill our opponents. But I do like having Fiery Impulse on hand, just because it's another instant speed spell that can shock and get rid of some smaller creatures and clear the way for our prowess creatures on the ground. Also running 3 copies of Play with Fire. I've seen some with 4. I like running 3 for this list because it makes room for something else that I'm going to get to here in a minute. But again, 2 damage removal, as well as I have found that this one I do send towards my opponent's life total a lot of times, because the scry does help set up my next draw, and it's doing 2 damage to the opponent while pumping my creatures. It can really help aggro out the game and close out games really quick if you're trying to get under your opponent's deck. And now the reason why I'm playing the 3 Play with Fire is so I can make room for 1 Fading Hope. And I saw this in a list and I was very curious why, but I think it's the truth, man. Fading Hope has gotten me out of so many sticky situations. It's saved creatures for me because it returns any target creature to its owner's hand, and if that creature's mana value is 3 or less, you get to scry 1, so you can use it to protect your creature, get a scry. I've even used it for those creatures that I just can't kill, those 6/6s, those big things, and let's just say I'm 1 turn away, but they got this huge creature that's gonna block and make that impossible. Well, Fading Hope it back to their hand, swing out for lethal. It's happened multiple times. I don't go anywhere without Fading Hope nowadays. I also forgot to mention that we are running 3 copies of Strangle. This card just does work. Again, there's so many 3 toughness creatures out there that Strangle really does some work in making sure to clear the board for that. It's just a really good card. And then the versatility of being able to hit planeswalkers, hitting things like Obnixiluses, hitting things like Narsets, and other planeswalkers that you're going to see. I really like having that, and that's something that things like Fiery Impulse doesn't hit. So I really like having Strangle in the main board, though I do find boarding it out pretty often depending on the matchup. And of course, we're running our 4 copies of Ancestral Treasure Cruise. With this kind of deck, we're playing so many spells, filling up that graveyard so often that we're easily going to be able to delve for 7. Even delving for 6 is not a bad play, because we're going to be drawing those 3 cards. Mana base is pretty simple. You're going to see your things, your playset of Spire Bluff Canal, your playset of Steam Vents, and your playset of Riverglide Pathway. I also run Otawara in the deck, good for, again, channeling and discarding it and getting those problem creatures out of the way. Again, just kind of keeping the board clear so that our prowess creatures can get in. I will say having Sprite Dragon and Ledger Shredder being flying already gives an advantage against a lot of decks, being able to fly over them. But sometimes we need to clear the ground way too for our Soul Scars and for Swift Spheres. Also running 2 copies of Den of the Bugbear, just a fantastic magic card for any aggro deck, making sure that we have some staying power, right? You hate to see it when you fill the board, and then you get board wipe. Well, Den of the Bugbear makes sure that we can always keep the pressure going, and if our opponent's life total is low enough, it could spell lethal for our opponent. Now, I've made some adjustments to the sideboard since the banning, just because we're going to see less of certain decks. I mean, we're not going to see Winota at all. So I've adjusted this, and of course, this is my local FNM deck, so you're going to see things that I might have reasons for, you might be a little questioning about, but I promise that there's a reason for it, at least in the local FNM, and I'll try to point those out. So we still are running Giganta as a companion, but I'm not sold on it. I rarely put it to my hand, and I don't think I have cast it. I may have cast it once at DreamHack when I was there, and that's again when I was playing it with Expressive Iteration, but I just don't know if it's necessary. Usually the best versatility I've gotten from it is it was discard fodder for my Izzet Charm, but I don't know if we need it. It's now companions are powerful. So many decks run them just to have the extra card. And I think there's merit in keeping Gigantha, but I also find this deck struggles to get to 5 mana at times. So I'm curious if we need to keep it. I'm going to keep it on my watch list, but for now we have Gigantha in the sideboard. We are also running 2 copies of Unlicensed Hearse, and this deck just eats up graveyard decks. I absolutely love it. I don't even really need to swing with it most times. I find just being able to instant speed remove 2 target cards from their graveyard is great. Plus, it is pretty awesome to have it down after you get a few cards under it, get it big enough, even holding it back as a blocker, being able to kind of threaten the crew, use it and block some of their bigger threats. Running 2 copies of Rending Volley. At first, this was definitely for Winotas, right? 4 damage. The spell can't be countered, and 4 damage to a target white or blue creature. I don't know what this is for right now, I'll be honest. Greasefang is good. You know, it's more instant speed removal for Greasefang. But in my meta, I'm not really seeing the reason, and really even at the meta overall, I'm really thinking that Rending Volley might need to change to Fry. So that you can combat we're going to see more Azorius control decks coming up. So I'm thinking the versatility on the Fry, being able to hit Planeswalkers, might be the call in the future. But for now, we got the Rending Volley, as well as 2 copies of Spell Pierce. We're able to kind of walk the line between an aggro deck and a control deck, not being hard set on either one, but I think this deck really rewards people who know when to slightly pivot into one or the other, and Spell Pierce is just going to help us have some counter magic, protect our creatures, or stop our opponent's key spells. We run 1 copy of Alpine Moon, of course, looking at Lotus, mono green card, looking to kind of combat that. We also have 3 copies of Aether Gust. Again, combating green, even doing some work against mono red. You get to that point in mono red where you're top decking and they're getting starting to get to just 1 card a turn, and if you're able to Aether Gust something critical, even something their card advantage engines like light up the stage and just put it back on top and not allowing them that card advantage, can really help you steal the game. So I like running 3 of those, as well as of course it does work against any green deck. Lastly, I have 2 copies of Abrade. The versatility, being able to deal 3 damage, again, works really good. It is good instant speed Greasefang repellent, or rat repellent if you will, because Greasefang is a 4/3, but it also destroys artifacts, so if they are able to resolve a Parhelion, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's game over. You can potentially remove that Parhelion, you can remove the Witch's Oven, you can remove Oni cults, so definitely some versatility. And I think with Winota going down, we're going to see some of those artifacts. We're going to see Greasefang go up, we're going to see Rakdos Sacrifice go up, so I think having the Abrade in the sideboard is a pretty solid choice. So now it's time to take the deck out and see how it does in the field. So I took this deck, this list, to my local FNM at the Game Closet here in Waco, Texas on June 10th of 2022. And we ended up in 2nd place out of 10 people. The deck did really well. We ended up going 3-1, and I had a great time with it. The deck definitely still packs a punch, and we even beat some decks that are also competing in that meta spot. Not necessarily at the top of the meta. We didn't see blue-white control, didn't see mono-green Karn, but definitely those A, B, C, kind of decks that go between those. We played against a few of those, and I'll really get to talk about those. But I think the deck is solid. So in game 1, we faced Boros Heroic and ended up taking that match 2-0. This was a really cool deck, and something I was a little nervous about. Is an interesting matchup because we were both trying to do similar things. We were trying to pump our creatures with cantrips, with spells. Now, of course, they're using actual pump spells like Ancestral Anger, Defiant Strike, so they can really pack a punch. And this deck has really gained some prominence with the new Illuminator Virtuoso with double strikes, so I was a little afraid for that. But I went in knowing that we had much more removal, and if we navigated the stack correctly, we were going to be able to destroy their creatures before their prowess triggers, before their heroic triggers, and we ended up doing that, and it ended up in a victory. For instance, might cast an Ancestral Recall targeting their faithful Hoplet, right? Is that faithful? Favor Hoplet. And in response, before they were able to gain indestructible and the counter, we would, instant speed, we would use our Play with Fire or our Fiery Impulse and destroy it by getting that spell on top of the stack before their protection was able to resolve. The great part was we were also pumping our creatures at this point. Each removal spell was also dealing them damage in the form of making our prowess creatures even bigger. It was a great one. Both games went to single-digit life totals, but we were able to come up on top in round 1. Again, in round 2, we faced a deck that is just seeing itself kind of floating in the meta, floating from off meta to D tier, sometimes C tier. It's definitely a little bit lower than the mono blue version, but we played Bant Spirits, and this deck still kind of scares me. I mean, things like Spell Queller pretty much hit the entirety of our deck, are able to counter any spell in our deck. And this deck can go tall as well as wide. The Lord effects in Bant Spirits can definitely get their creatures quite big, to where if we're not getting spells that are cantripping and getting our creatures big enough, eventually the bodies that our opponent presents, the spirits, are going to be so big that it's not worth swinging in with our prowess creatures if we don't have a way to pump them. We ended up winning this round 2-1, had some really good games. So a nail biter, a very good one. We definitely shook hands and kind of talked through our lines and stuff like that. It was just a really good post-game conversation, and just one of the many reasons why I love FNM. Now in round 3, we saw a deck that I think that is going to definitely be seeing a lot more play, and it definitely has some legs on it. We played against Mardu Greasefang, and we ended up losing this match 1-2. I really didn't expect to see this one at my local FNM. It's not a deck that I really heard a lot of people talking about, and it makes sense. I played it against a opponent that I had never seen at the event before. If they were there, I had never played against them, so I was happy to meet them. We struck up a really good conversation, and it was nice to welcome someone new into our local Pioneer community. So it was a good game, and we ended up losing that round, like I said, 1-2. Lastly, we went into round 4, and I got to play against a friend who really prides himself on home brews, and I think rightfully so. Their decks do really well. They're very off meta, but they always do really well, kind of landing them near the top of there, and sometimes winning our FNM. And this deck that they brought today, and this deck that they brought today was their Abzan mid-range deck. But just so you know, no rhinos. I don't know, maybe I should consider it. I love Siege Rhino. I think it's such a cool card. But it was an Abzan mid-range deck, and we ended up winning this match 2-0. Their deck in particular is about early removal and then landing some of their larger threats like Elder Gargaroth and Kenrith the Return King. Some pretty scary stuff that's really hard for our deck to deal with. But I think our advantage was we were just able to get under them and get their life total down before they were able to resolve those things. I remember the last turn very specifically because I swung in with 2 Swift Spheres, played Consider, saw a Play with Fire on top, kept it, drew it, played another Consider, another Play with Fire on top, drew that, took them down to exactly 4, but I was tapped out, so I knew, okay, if I can just make it to my untap, I can Play with Fire to the face, will be good for the 4 damage, but unfortunately I do know that they have ways to gain life. Luckily on their turn, they didn't have any life gain. They just removed my Swift Spheres, and then on my untap I went Play with Fire, and it was game for us. After I reported it real quick on the companion app, they were like, hey, I really want to practice, especially against your deck. Do you mind if we play some more? So we played a few more games. It was a really good one. We had a good conversation, lots of laughs, lots of fun. And again, it just goes to show the reason why FNM is such a cool place, because yes, we're competing, yes, we're playing, yes, we want to win, but that doesn't mean that we don't also want to grow, that we also don't want to socialize, that we don't want to have fun, and we just don't want to, we want to, all those things, we want to enjoy, we want it to be casual, we want to have fun and not get so upset about things, and we just want to practice and get better and enjoy the game of Magic. So for my final verdict, I have to say that this deck definitely still has legs. I do not think that Prowess is dead, but I also don't think that we're going to see it at the top of the meta anytime soon. It's a very good deck. I think it's a perfect FNM brew. I think it's fun, and I'm sure people smarter than me are going to tune it even better and probably win some leagues with it. But I can't confidently say that it's going to ever be S tier or even A tier. I think it's a solid deck. And I think it's one of those decks where if you have the cards, if you've already built a deck like this and you have the land, you have the cards, it's a pretty expensive deck. So if you have the cards, go ahead and put it together, play it, take it to FNM, have a blast with it. But if you're looking to buy into Pioneer, you're looking to buy into the format, there's cheaper options like mono red that are much more favored in the meta, or even for this price, just more stable, more well-established decks that you could look at, like things like mono green and even Rakdos. But again, if you have these decks, you have these cards, let's say you just bought a playset of letter shredders and you're like, what the heck am I going to do with these? Well, I think this deck is still a viable choice for that. Again, as an Izzet mage, I was very scared when I heard of the banning of Expressive Iteration, but I'm glad to say that it did not absolutely kill this deck. Izzet is alive. I think we're going to see people playing it. I think, again, Phoenix and Control are definitely going to be hit really hard by it, and maybe we'll even see Prowess get up there a little bit higher in the meta than them, but Izzet is definitely alive. I think it's just a color combination that's very interesting. The Delve spells are just super powerful, and I think it's something that as long as Delve spells are in the format, Izzet style decks like this are going to be viable. At least they're going to be explored, and again, I'm glad that it's still a deck that we can take up, I can sleeve up, take it to my FNM, and enjoy. It's my perfect, like, I just love decks like this. I love, if you love turning creatures sideways, drawing a bunch of cards and casting spells, like this is heaven for you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech. I hope you learned a little something, and thank you so much for sticking around for this. Of course, let me know down in the comments what you think about the deck. Is this something that you want to play? Do you have any suggestions for it? What would you replace Expressive Iteration with? I'd love to hear that down in the comments, and while you're down there, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. It wouldn't be possible without my patrons over on Patreon. Bridger, also an Elk, Guyan, Prime Speaker Florian, Ryota, Ryan, and Virgil. Thank you so much. And if you want to support the channel, go over to patreon.com/casual_Jake_, where you can check out the tier levels, the perks, and have your name in the credits as well. I couldn't do this without my patrons. Thanks for watching. I'm Casual Jake reminding you, don't forget to play your land drops, and I'll see you next time.